Hey everybody, this is Bart Hanson for Crush Live Poker, and I want to go over a rather difficult hand that I recently played on the Hustler Casino live stream from about a week ago in this rather big Thursday ante-game. Now, this game can be very, very difficult because of the way that it always goes multi-way. And what's playing right here in the background is I would say 4 or 5 hands in the first hour of the show where I would just get ace jack, raise, miss, get 4 callers, ace queen, 3 bet, get 3 or 4 callers and miss, get ace king. It was really, really crazy. The first hour I was just being dealt all of these like really, really high card hands, not getting the right flops to hit or to barrel, and then always really getting multi-way action. When you play in a very, very loose game like that, almost like a typical 1-2 game, it can be very, very frustrating, and it can be very, very difficult to manage as well. So finally, at about an hour and a half into the show, like my sixth big offsuit ace queen, ace king type of hand, I'm going to connect. And I've actually done my best to black out all the graphics, black out all the percentages, and we're going to play in the dark as if you are playing along with me. And again, it was just a typical spot where I raise with ace queen from up front and I get 3 callers. Again, we're playing 5-5 100 big blind ante, which akin plays to, I would say, like a 50-100 game. The standard open is to about 300. So we go 4 ways, and you can see I finally connect. Ace 5-9 rainbow, and the reason why I preloaded some of those hands was normally in a game like this, I will just bet my hand for value. I seriously considered checking here, and the reason why I seriously considered checking was because of the fact that I had been checking the previous hour all the times that I missed. So inherently, if people were paying attention and I would bet into 3 people on this board, normally I'm going to have something. So you can kind of play a little bit of second guessing with yourself and be like, well, is it best to check? I still think it's best to bet here in a game like this where you're just going to getting so much value. People are calling with weak aces. They're calling with 9x. So I just decided to just go with a bet here, and I decided to go 500, and I was pretty excited about the flop. I was like, all right, I'm going to get max value. Nick, who's probably the other solid player at the table, he just gets out of the way. Don't have to worry about him. And this guy, who's going to be the primary villain in the hand, Mike Nia, he is going to make the call. And this is really, really important if you want to improve your poker hand reading ability. I think the most important sort of factor in this entire hand is the fact that Mike Nia has called next to act, and he's got Nick Airball behind him on the flop. So remember that. Now, he could easily have a 9, he could have a straight draw, he could have an ace as well, but there are a number of different holdings that he can have. Now, Nick Airball takes like a second look, and he also calls from behind. But again, these are guys that will certainly piece off with gut shots, maybe even any piece of it. I still think I have the best hand here, just an absolute ton. Now, we're going to move to the turn, and I thought this was a really, really good turn card for me because it really doesn't interact with the board. This is a better turn card for me than if the turn was, say, like a 7 or an 8 where somebody could have a straight. I really thought that the only thing that this might do is maybe give somebody like King 9 for 2 pair, because I think all of these guys are 3-betting ace king. They're 3-betting pocket kings, so there's really no reason for me not to bet here. Now, the sizing is really interesting because if we were heads up, I think you can easily make the case, as the theory goes, that you could go really big here on the turn, force an ace to call down, get maximum value. Multi-way, it's a little bit different. I kind of chose a sort of an in-between sizing here of 1,300. In retrospect, I might have been able to go maybe to like 2,000, something like that, but it's really not that big of a deal. And again, this is really, I think, the key inflection point of this kind of entire hand. Mike Nia is going to think about it for a while, and he is going to call again. Remember, Nick Airball called behind him. The reason why I think that this is so important here for hand reading is the fact that when we take a look back at the flop, when he has a guy that calls behind him, like I said on the flop, I think he might have a 9, he might have an ace, he could have a 5, he could have a straight draw, he could have 3-4 for a straight draw, something like that. However, after the flop, because Nick airball's behind him, when I bet this sizing on the turn and he calls again, all of his 9x, like a hand like 8-9, 7-9, or like some sort of like 5x, all of those hands are going to fold out now when this overcard, this disconnected overcard comes on the turn, unless he picks up a flush draw. So if he has 8-9 of clubs, he's just going to fold. If he has 4-5 of diamonds, he's just going to fold. If he has gut shots, 6-7, 7-8 without hearts, he's just going to fold. However, if he has like 10-9 of hearts, 8-9 of hearts, 6-7 of hearts, 7-8 of hearts, something like that, he's going to continue to call. He's also going to continue to call with an ace. And of course, more importantly, or most importantly, and I definitely checked back at the suits of my hand, ace X of hearts here is available, but it's really, really important when you're taking a look at a hand rating to realize that he's just not going to have 9X without hearts here moving along to the river. So he makes the call. Now, Nick airball folds behind rather quickly, and now we're going to go heads up here to the river, and I was just thinking about, maximum value the whole way. Now, the river was kind of a shitty card for me. And again, I'll sort of tell you why, because I think a very, very good chunk of his range is hands that have backdoor heart combinations. And it's really, really close here, because one of the things, I think we all have weaknesses in our game, and one of my weaknesses in my game when I'm sort of dealing with chips that are a little bit unfamiliar, not that these chips are really all that unfamiliar, but visually, I actually have a much easier sort of time playing online when they tell you exactly what the stacks are. Visually, I'm not the best at estimating somebody's stack size based upon the way that their chips are stacked. On the river here, I thought he had about a pot size bet left. Now, looking back at it, and the graphics are correct, he actually has 7,350. The reason why I think that that's important is because if he only had like 5,000 left and I wanted to go for some thin value, like maybe like bet 2,000, something like that, if I were to get jammed on, the pot would be like 12,000, 3,000 for me to call. It would be a very, very difficult fold. Now, looking back at this, when he has 7,350, if I were to bet, say, like 2,000 here, and now, he were to jam, then it would be more like 14,000, 5,000 for me to call. And I think I could make a tough laydown. So that's number one. But number two, this is what I was going in, and this is what we teach sometimes over on Crush Live Poker. When you arrive at the river, sometimes the best play, it's not, all that common, is actually to check with the intention of check folding to a large bet if you think you have run out of value. Now, that does not mean that you're going to lose the hand. The reason why sometimes we might go into a river with the intention of check folding is because all of the sort of the weaker types of hands that we beat will check behind. So it very well might go check, check, and we might win. But when our opponent bets, usually that's a situation where, especially if it's a large bet, we can sort of suss out that we don't have the best hand. And that's exactly why I thought about this for a while, and I ended up checking. Now, the hands that I have that have him beat, obviously, are any weaker ace. Now, the only weaker aces that are out there are ace jack, ace 8, ace 7, ace 6, etc., down to ace deuce. I don't even think that Mike necessarily calls with a whole lot of offsuit aces, so they have to be of the suited variety. So, you would have to have ace X of spades, something like that, which would not be the backdoor hearts. Because remember, I lose to backdoor ace X of hearts. So it'd have to be like ace deuce of spades through, say, like ace 8 of spades and ace jack of spades. So those are the only hands that I really beat, and obviously like ace jack offsuit. I thought at the time that most of the hands, those particular hands, would just check back here at the end. They would be happy to take a showdown. Now, what do I lose to here? I lose to ace 10, which is a river 2 pair, but primarily, and again, as I was talking about before, 9x of hearts, straight draws that back into hearts, things like that. So when I'm in a situation here, even if a weak ace would call me, if I can count the combos and there are more hands that end up beating me on the river here, then the play is not to bet. The play is actually to check and then fold to a large size bet. I just thought that this was absolutely the worst card, one of the absolute worst cards in the deck for me, because of the fact that he's going to be playing a fair amount of ace 10 offsuit for a raise. So I lose to 2 pair. And also, of course, the backdoor hearts. I mean, if this river was like an offsuit 3, it would have been golden. I absolutely would have gone for 3 streets. But when I was at this river, I was totally thinking that he would be checking back any like ace deuce of spades through ace 8 of spades that aren't 2 pair, ace jack off, and then betting everything else that was stronger. And I just knew that backdoor hearts was a very, very large portion of his range. Because remember, moving back to the turn, he's not just calling with 9x and turning it into a bluff. He has to have something at least strong or a strong draw to call next to act on the turn with a guy behind him. And unfortunately for me, he moved all in. And I was just like, oh man, this just sucks. I do a double check here of my cards, making sure I don't have a heart, which is obviously bad for me here that I have no heart. I mean, if I had the ace of hearts in my hand, it would be a much, much easier call because he couldn't have ace x of hearts. But I was just looking back at this. I have no heart. The way that this went down, he calls the turn, and now he's jamming on the river. What did he get to with the river that he's jamming with now? The only thing that I really beat here is some sort of hand that turns something into a bluff. But again, he doesn't have 9x without hearts with the guy calling behind on the turn. So ace x of hearts is fully out there. And I think he's checking back all of the weaker aces that I beat. So I actually thought that this was a rather trivial fold. I actually didn't even think too much about it. And I was like, oh, I'll just live to see another day. And ended up folding. And much like the last session that I played, I mean, I was just like, yeah, I mean, didn't even think twice about it. I think somebody came over to me or I got a text after the show and they were like, do you know that Mike Nia had ace jack and bluffed you off the hand? And I was like, he had ace jack? What? I couldn't believe it. Now he has ace jack with the ace of hearts. One of the things too that I talk about in the commentary sometimes is I can see the cards. Obviously I couldn't see the cards here, but sometimes I can see the cards and I don't even know what the player is doing. Like, I don't know if he thought he was bluffing here or if it was for value. I don't know. I think it could go 50-50 because I would say 99% of the time, if somebody ends up with ace jack here, they're just going to check it back because most people in my spot aren't folding aces up. They're not folding sets. So the only reason why you would turn ace jack with the ace of hearts into a bluff would be specifically to bluff ace queen off of the hand. Specifically. This is not like he had like ace 3 offsuit with the ace of hearts and wants to try to bluff like all the other better aces. It's only ace queen. So I was just baffled and absolutely mind boggled here. But I will say, even if the same thing happened over and over again, I just think that this is a fold. I don't want to be results oriented. He bet 7,000 into 5,000, which means that he's risking about a pot and a half size bet. Like, from a minimum defense frequency standpoint, you know, I have to call with maybe like the top 40% of hands because he's actually risking more than the pot that I arrive with, something like that. I was getting right around a little bit better than 1.5 to 1 just based upon the turn action and the fact that it was multi-way. I just thought it was a trivial fold. If it was heads up, I would have a much, much more difficult time folding here. And I probably would have even bet the river, but it all comes back to multi-way, the guy behind him on the flop and him calling again on the turn with a guy behind him. I will live to see another day. Do me a favor, if you like what you see, hit that like button. Put a lot of effort into blacking out the cards and the graphics. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to see more training videos like this, head over to crushlivepoker.com.